All right, welcome back with the first pick here. Day 3 of the Senior Bowl is shortly wrapping up right here behind us. I'm Ryan Wilson, that's JP Acosta. We've been here all week, and if you missed the first few days of coverage, you want to go back and check it out, go back and check it out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Music. It is all there. But JP, let's wrap this thing up. A lighter practice today for the skill position players, but as JP always does, he's checking out the big guys. So I'll say this: you must have 8 pairs of eyes because it seems like you don't miss a line. I'll ask you about someone, and you guys in the comments left some guys that you want to talk about. I'm gonna hit you up because I know we eyeballed them, so we'll get to those names. And if you're in the comments and you want to mention guys that stood out to you that we don't get to, let us know because we're gonna go back and watch them all at some point. But I love to do that. So let's start as we always do with something that stood out. We'll circle back to the quarterbacks. What are the things that got your attention on day 3 here?
The first thing that stood out was how many guys participated. Bro, we saw a lot. This year, Senior Bowl, normally most times from the Senior Bowl, we see a lot of guys opt out after the first 2 days of practice. We'll see guys opt out after day 1 of practice. But this year, only 3 guys ended up not practicing, and a lot of those could be considered due to injury. Colton Hood didn't practice for a national team. There's another player from the national team that didn't practice.
Williams at Ole Miss is safety.
Yeah, Williams didn't practice, and then Aaron Anderson, varsity, she didn't practice for an American team. But all the top guys, like your TJ Parkers of the world, Lee Hunter, Caleb Banks, all those guys still continuing to practice is a really good sign for the Senior Bowl, but also for their draft stock. That competitiveness, that competitive nature, that's really going to be a big feather in their cap. So I'm really excited. I'm really proud of those guys. Stayed here and stayed competitive.
No, that's a great call because we'll play a little game. You say help or hurt. Lee Hunter, did he help his draft stock or hurt it?
Massively helps.
TJ Parker
Helps.
Caleb Banks, who we hadn't seen play a lot because of the foot injury.
Massively helped this week.
And we'll take a quick 10-second aside. How dominant was he in the one-on-one?
That was a dominant one-on-one session by Caleb Banks. There was a point where he was going up against the Auburn guard.
Yeah,
and
Jeremiah Wright.
Jeremiah Wright, who had actually given him a little bit of problems on the first couple of days. He hit some of the inside swim move and then immediately starts talking crap after.
And I don't remember if Auburn played Florida this year, but I'm sure they're well acquainted with one another.
Yeah.
So that was not probably a new kind of
doing that for years now. He got Jake Slaughter again, which is very funny considering they're teammates. And I know one of my friends had asked Banks, I don't know if he gets Jake Slaughter. And he was like, yeah, I told him I'm gonna kick your you know what every single time we line up. So Caleb Banks continuing to bring that intensity and bringing that fire. I think he's the best defensive tackle in this draft class. I think he's locking himself into a round 1 status.
And that's a great point because my comp in terms of the physical/injury journey he'd taken was Johnny Newton out of Illinois. But Johnny never had a chance to play after he hurt his split, so we didn't see him in the pre-draft process. Caleb, as we talked about, 6'6", legit, 330, legit, 35-inch arms, legit. So you talk about get off the bus guy. He's on his own bus because he's so dead. Then the rest of the team comes after him, and it's a whole thing. And Zion Young,
Yep, massively helped.
Yes, he had rush from Missouri. So it's a great example. We did see Denai Dennis Sutton go down with what, me being the doctor from up here, looked like maybe get the wind knocked out of him. It didn't look a lower body injury, so hopefully he's okay. But it's been a rare instance where you see someone get hurt, so hopefully he's okay. But the point is that show up and play, and typically things get better for you. And it's funny you say that because our buddy Rick Spielman used to always say, if you roll the ball out, I want you to go out there and compete. Like your guys don't throw at the combine, or guys take a few days off. And that wasn't the case this week for the first time in what feels like years. And I think everyone benefited for sure. All right, let's circle back to the quarterbacks real quick, as we like to do. It's been a ho-hum week.
Very quiet.
And I wonder if it's just going to be a situation like when we saw Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. here. There were no real standouts from those guys. Both ended up being first-round picks. There's not a first-round pick here unless something crazy happens. But you and I talked about physically, we're probably leaning towards Taylen Green. Sawyer Robertson, we wanted to see him cut it loose. He did a little bit more of that here. We saw a lot more bobble snaps, or some more bobble snaps, I should say. Cole Payton struggled. Dave Bobby had some as well. So I don't know if you need a quarterback, you probably were looking at the 2 guys named Fernando and Ty.
Yeah.
And then after that, probably Carson Beck ended up being QB3. And then these are all going to be developmental guys. If you hit on a Taylen Green, then you found something.
Yeah, and I think this is sort of a reflection of where we are with this QB class, especially after Jonte Moore decided to go back to school. I think we're seeing a lot more of, with NIL, with the transfer portal, you're going to see a lot more guys that are coming out. Maybe they can become a spot starter in the case of like a guy like Garrett Nussmeier. Garrett Nussmeier did not have the greatest season this past season. I think there are some issues that I have when it comes to some of his reckless play style doesn't really benefit him. But I do think there's a potential for him to just be a spot starter in the NFL. But it depends on when do you draft those guys? How high do you draft a guy that could probably max out and be a spot starter like a guy like Mac Jones or like a Dylan Gabriel last year? But Dylan Gabriel's drafted round 3. So,
And if we're being honest, Garrett Nussmeier is not in the Mac Jones coming out of college conversation.
well, Mac Jones coming out of college was one of, if not the most accurate quarterback in college football history at that.
Right.
So
I think national title.
yeah, we're looking at a lot of question marks in this class.
Let's ask you this. Sorry to interrupt you, but Garrett's only 6 feet too. So he's not Baker Mayfield and he's not the best version of Johnny Manziel. He can move a little bit, but he's a traditional pocket passer. He has a pretty good arm, but there's nothing special about him other than his dad's Doug Nussmeier. He's been around the game forever. I mean that positively. Like he's just not a guy that started playing football a couple years ago, like some of the guys here legitimately who've made their way. So I don't know what the thing you hang your hat on it, if you're thinking about him as a top 50 pick, which was a conversation we were having last summer, but he just was there for putting here.
I think the best case for Nussmeier is he's a gutsy quarterback. He is going to put the ball in the tight windows, but I do think that sort of plays against him because, like you said, he's 6 feet. He's not an incredibly athletic quarterback. He doesn't have the best tools. So that leads to him, because of that aggression, he's going to take a lot of chances that his body just can't catch, that his arm just can't catch. So is this a case where you'd rather have to talk a QB down actor when it comes to taking shots downfield, or would you rather want to go and get a guy who you have to talk into taking shots downfield, given the fact that there aren't a lot of tantalizing athletic prospects outside of guys like Taylen Green?
Now, let me ask you this now that I think about it. I was higher on Colin Ford last year and Will Howard than where they were drafted, both in the 6th round, I think. Those 3 names, Will Howard, Kyle McCord, and Garrett Nussmeier, how would you rank them draft order-wise?
Oof, that is a great question. I think Nussmeier's probably in between the both. Like,
Okay.
Either if you have it McCord, McCord, Nussmeier, Howard, McCord. I think that's sort of where I would lean because, again, Nussmeier just can't stay healthy. That's the underlying part of it. That's a big issue because if you're going to be a 6-foot quarterback, you have to be durable. That's sort of the questions we talk about Ty Simpson upcoming weeks.
Yeah.
That's the discussion we're going to have about him. At Nussmeier, we're going to have that question about the durability because he's just not an overly athletic or overly big guy. Like, again, the best thing about Josh Allen's development is the fact he never missed games despite taking a lot of hits because he's 6'5", 240 plus pounds. Garrett Nussmeier is not that quarterback. So how much are you willing to bet on upside with a guy that just doesn't have, who might be athletically capped?
And the footnote is, again, to reiterate, Will Howard and Kyle McCord were 6th round picks.
Yeah.
So how much higher are you going to draft someone without those tools? And Kyle McCord's a little bigger, similar arm strength, probably, maybe the same level athlete. But we know that Will Howard, he can run and he's big and he can take hits, and he's developing as a passer. So that's the math you sort of have to do. Diego Pavia, we talked about him yesterday. Nothing. He has not changed since yesterday. Cole Payton's a fun guy to watch, but he'll probably be a developmental day three guy, maybe a probably free agent. But let's talk about Taylen Green before we move over to the quarterbacks, because I think you and I both agree that when you're upsiding a guy, he's at the top of the list, and he's done some things well this week, and he's not going to be able to. We're not going to know that he's better at not fumbling and turning them all over this week in practice. But if he makes those steps, and teams are convinced that he can get over that, I think top 100 is realistic.
Yeah, and I think with Taylen Green this week, you saw the highs. Like I said, the pass to Fields was a super high. Right, seeing the downfield aggression, the arm strength, but he did have some really bad turnovers yesterday.
Oh, he did. Okay, again, 8 eyes.
Yeah,
8 eyes. Acosta caught that.
Yeah, he had an interception in team where he sort of was. He's trying to pick the ball on the sidelines, do it behind him, and Oregon State safety picked him off.
Yeah.
So he had a couple of bad turnovers yesterday, and that's sort of the MO on Taylen Green, where like he has some of these really high, really impressive moments, but then just has some moments where you just, what are you thinking? What are you doing? So I think with Taylen Green, there is potential for an offensive coordinator or a QB coach to say, hey, we could fix these mechanical issues because there just aren't that many guys as athletically talented as Bree.
Yeah.
But it's gonna take
and
a couple
gentlemen,
years
media
for
is now
him to
allowed on the
figure it out.
field.
So is this
And
gonna
Please stay
be
within the
a
yellow room.
situation where
10 minutes has been added to
maybe
the
like
clock.
the Packers or something with Matt LaFleur as head coach? Like,
Right.
you take a chance on him. Maybe this is a situation where you just let him cook for a few years and see what you got, because this could turn into something. But you don't want to tie yourself to it super high.
That's right. And the Packers is a good call. And another one that sort of stuck out to me, defending, we've heard some chit chat about Mac Jones's future because he perhaps starts somewhere. But just for the sake of conversation, let's say Mac Jones moves on from San Francisco. I mean, Taylen Green, to me, given what he's seen on tape, should be the same conversation as Trey Lance. And if that's the direction that Kyle Shanahan is so interested in going in, that would make sense on some level, not as the third overall pick, but as a third or fourth or fifth round pick, wherever he ends up going. And the other thing I told you, and I don't know if I mentioned the show on the podcast, but when I talked to Taylen on Monday, he said he spent a lot of time this offseason working on marrying his eyes to his feet. And that's to your point about the accuracy issues at all three levels. And, you fix that up, and that's never cooking with gas
Yeah.
in terms of what the future could look like.
And you can tell with a lot of NFL quarterbacks, once they fix their base, fix their footwork, then everything starts to come together. See a lot of issues because a lot of quarterbacks come from the air raid. They're not exactly like regimented in their
That's right.
Like, I think another big example is Trevor Lawrence coming out of Clemson. Footwork has been an issue. And then this year, they changed up the footwork, they changed his stance a little bit, and you saw what happened with all the passing yards, touchdowns, MVP finalists this year, Trevor Lawrence. And so I think if you can get somebody to work with his footwork, and like you said, like Taylor Green told you, marrying the eyes to the feet, that's when everything starts to come together. Because throwing a football isn't just an arm thing. There is a whole body, you got to Josh, everything tied together. So if Taylor Green can tie that stuff together, I mean, sky's the limit.
And maybe one of the traps that the teams may fall into is that Josh Allen was such a mess tools wise, not tools wise, but his ability to put it up to marry everything together coming out of Wyoming, and that was one of the knocks on him. And he's maybe the rarest example of someone who was able to fix it. And if you have visions of that with someone like Taylor Green, maybe they get you in trouble, or maybe hit another home run. So we'll see. Let's see a couple of names. We talked about Tyron Montgomery yesterday, the wide receiver out of John Carroll by way of Nicholls State. I had a chance to talk to him this morning, and I won't go into detail, but his story is fantastic. So I wrote about it on CBSSports.com. Go check it out. He's a fantastic young man. He didn't start playing football until his junior year of college when he was 19. And I'll just tell you the quick one-liner. His brother now is 18. He's 6'5", over 200 pounds, plays quarterback at a small college. They were playing catch during COVID in the backyard. And he said, yeah, why don't you try this? So he went from playing catch to flag football to running routes at Nicholls State. And now he's made his way to John Carroll, and he's had a great week here. Any other wide receivers got your attention? Benny Anthony, I talked to out of Wisconsin. He had another good day.
Josh Cameron from Baylor. Really just physical specimen.
Yeah.
6'1", 223. But what really stands out is his strong hands. Even when in contested situations, he's still making catches, and that's going to be really good for him because he doesn't really create that separation, doesn't really sink his hips that well. But he can create when you just put him on the area code. He does a really good job of extending his arms and going out to get the. You see a lot of receivers, they'll let the ball come into themselves and hit them in the chest. Talk about body catcher. Josh Cameron is a hands catcher.
And that's a big deal, obviously, in college, but at the next level where the windows are so much tighter and the coverage is a lot better. Barry Brown, I thought, had a good day. Yeah, the LSU wide receiver, slight of frame. Played actually mostly outside at LSU, but his ticket's going to be as a returner as well, where he is absolutely electric, transferred from Kentucky to LSU. Didn't have a great season, but offensively, no one did at LSU, so that's understandable. But, he made some catches in the middle of the field against some high coverage, and that was good to see. He's not quite as electric this week as Terrence Johnson was a year ago, but I think he's probably going to be a late day 3 guy who has huge upsides as teams, and maybe he's your number 4 or number 5 receiver. You may feel differently.
No, I think Barry Brown is such a fascinating prospect because he has the field tilted speed. I think that's the thing that's going to get him into NFL rosters, onto playing fields, because you can't teach speed as much as you can teach everything else. If you got a guy that can run 4.2, you just want to get him on the field and see what happens. He's going to make his money as a special teamer at first, and if he can continue to be like a separator downfield, I think that's really going to help him, especially when we get to we see a lot of offenses that sort of need that vertical separation. Think about teams sort of like the Chargers, where everything has become so congested offensively. They just need somebody like I compare receiving core as the basketball starting fouls. You need your 3-point shooters. You need the floor space. And I think Varian Brown could be a really good floor spacer for a team like Chargers, a team like Panthers could really need a floor spacer for Tedero McMillan, Jalen Coker. I think Varian Brown makes a lot of sense. Both those teams on like day 3.
By the way, I don't know if there's a bigger fan outside of his family of Jalen Coker than JP Acosta. You're a big Jalen Coker guy. Yeah, no, absolutely. I want to mention, by the way, on one of the team drills, Barry had a PBU against him by Colin Wright, the corner out of Stanford, and I made the mistake. I talked to Colin a couple days ago, and he's a really good corner, but I was reading my little write-up on him, and I questioned his deep speed very politely, and he said, I'm he essentially said, I'm pretty good technically at what I do, so I'm usually going to 75%, so you haven't seen me open enough. He was not threatened at all by Varian Brown on the 25-yard route. He was right in his hip pocket, and so Colin 1, Wilson 0. So shout out to him for proving me wrong on that one. Any of the wide receivers, or maybe we should talk with some tight ends. I've talked about tight ends this week, and I thought today the guys sort of showed up a little bit. Matthew Hibner out of SMU had a nice catch down the seam from Sawyer Robertson. We asked Sawyer to rip a few, so he ripped that one. And then we saw Tanner Koziel from Houston have a nice catch in the end zone here. I'm not sure who threw that ball. Maybe backwards, maybe Cole Payton and Sawyer, but either way, it was a nice catch. It was good to see those guys sort of separate themselves a little bit. Because again, like we haven't talked a lot about tight ends.
The Texas A&M tight end is named.
Oh, Bart Hirsch.
Yes, he's had some really nice catches this week. Yesterday, in the compete drill in practice, he had a nice catch over Kyle Lewis, and he did that.
Oh, great call. That's right. Yeah,
the ones where he's in tight contested. I think it was a pass you talked about yesterday for Sawyer Robertson.
Yeah,
where he just put the ball up because the linebacker's head was turned, and he made a great hands catch. He did that against VJ Payne yesterday, and he actually moves really well against a guy that I'm gonna have to go back and watch Texas A&M tape to see how he moves and how he did in game scenarios because he was doing really well. So I really liked how he did this week among the tight end.
That's a good call, and I continue to talk myself into Sawyer Robertson, and when I talked to him, he talked about just throwing the ball to Michael Trigg, and maybe as he's become more comfortable this week with the tight ends and understanding what they're capable of, maybe that's part of his process as well. We'll find out. At the end of the day, it's just probably going to get drafted day 3, but that's a conversation for another time. Oh, by the way, so I asked you guys to throw in some names yesterday that you were curious about, and I'm gonna ask the expert here because he has eyes everywhere. Someone asked about Tim Keenum, the Alabama defensive tackle. From what I saw, and I didn't watch closely, I haven't gone back and watched yet. He was nothing stood out to me, but what did you see?
I thought he was stout as a runner. That's what Tim Keenan is going to bring. I like my defensive tackles built like French Bulldogs. That's just that. The English Bulldogs, I like the squatty. I think when you think about where the NFL is going when it comes to defensive tackle play, it's not as much about length. And we talked about Caleb Banks, who's obviously an outlier in this scenario. But I think it's more about leverage and getting into guys' chests immediately. So I think Tim Keenan has a chance to get onto an NFL roster and be an instant like run defender for a team. 100% so quick into the chest of the offensive lineman. He doesn't really offer a lot as a pass rusher. Didn't really offer a lot as a pass rusher this week.
That's right.
Where he's going to make his money is stopping the run.
And look, know who you are. Like don't be who you're not. Like I'm not going to play center in the NBA. I got to do a podcast. That's where I'm at. Someone asked about NC State edge rusher Keenum Sloan, who I saw a couple reps, and I thought he held his own, but I had not watched him closely yet this week.
He was a little surprising. I actually thought he played a lot bigger than his size.
Yeah,
I saw it was really fascinating because the national team has all the tweeners. Like we talked about Nadame Tucker, Romello Height was on the national team. Sloan is another one of those guys, weighed in at 239 pounds. Obviously, just going to be really hard to find a role for a guy who's sub 240 on the edge, but he was consistently making plays. I like some of his ability to win around the corner. He's more of an effort guy.
Right.
But I think this week he's kind of showed that he can play around the edge. He knows what he wins with. And he actually had some really nice run stops, which I was like, okay, you're not a liability defending tight ends. So if you're going to be a 3-4 like edge, or you're going to be on the outside, an outside linebacker, you got to be able to bow up and get big against tight ends. So the fact that he's able to do that was a really good feather in his cap.
Yeah, and that was one of the not knocks, concerns about Nate Herbig coming out, right?
Yes.
Nick, I get the brothers mixed up. The edge rusher out of Wisconsin. Would he have to move inside? And he's a designated pass rusher, but who can also play the run at a average to above average level, and some level that's all you want. But I got some Iowa fans asking about Jennings Dunker, and I'll tell you just my cursory watching, not having gone back and watched practice yet. Jennings Dunker and Bo Stevens, the right tackle and guard respectively in college. I think Jennings probably had a little better week in terms of consistency. We saw Bo have some one-on-one issues. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. But what was your takeaway from those two guys?
I think Jennings Dunker had a really up and down week. Honestly, I think some
10
of the
minutes
he
is
does
up.
as a tackle,
Please
he's
exit
a
the way that
little
you
worried.
came
He's a
in.
little bit high
This
as a
concludes
pass
Senior
protector. And
Bowl
when you see him
practice.
lose this week,
Please drive
you
on
saw
stage,
him lose
please.
because guys
Thank
had
you
a
for coming
huge
out.
chest. Logan Fano beat him up with power because he stands so upright as a pass protector. So when he's going backwards, he has no ability to drop the steps or drop his weight.
Right.
So that allows himself to control the area. But at guards, you're able to mitigate that. I like some of the stuff that's movement wise. This is not an arm length thing. He's a rooted guard with an arm. He's got long enough.
Yeah.
It's just he doesn't look comfortable for his attack. Sometimes it feels like he's tight. He's worried about power going through his chest.
Yes.
So he gives up his outside assault. So I think he might be better in the NFL's guard attack.
Where he has some bumper help.
Yeah, like where he has some bump. Somebody, like I said, it's like it helped now. I think with Bo Stevens, I told Ryan before we started, he's like a knuckleball. His go-to move is snap strap. He's grab the outside shoulders of defensive linemen and he's gonna snatch them down. He wins in pass rush one-on-ones, but when you see his reps on social media, it's because he's snatch strap.
Yeah.
That's what he does. But when he's losing, it's because he goes to do it and pick and swat his hands down. He has no ability to redirect or exit. He was on the receiving end of a really bad rep this week. And against Daryl Jackson, when he first showed up yesterday, he was on the receiving end.
Daryl literally got out of the cab here for Trumbull, walked in there, had the rep, then he went back to the hotel.
Exactly. He showed up, did that, went right back home. So Bo Stevens, he's just going to struggle a little bit.
Yeah.
Like when he realizes he needs to add another pitch to his arsenal when it comes to like curse this guy.
At least a 75-mile-an-hour fastball isn't that bunch.
Yeah, something to throw guys
That's
off.
right.
I think a guy like Marcus Bo did a really good job pairing up his assets.
Last year at Purdue.
And I think Bo Stevens, you've been bitter, just very
No, that's a good call. And he was after the Giants, I believe. Marcus Bo was. A couple of things we'll get out of here real quick. I'm going to name some guys that had great weeks and I was thoroughly enjoyed watching, and I'm glad they reintroduced themselves to me because, I watch all these guys before we get here and I forget a lot of them just because I'm old and I have memory issues. And then you can tell me maybe, I'll tell you my question should be. So, but I got to call out Wyatt Clark, TCU safe. Had an interception today. Kyle Lewis has been balling out of it. The tweener, 220 pounds. He can play safety. He can play close to the line of scrimmage. He had the fumble today that we talked about earlier. And then, so I think those guys have helped themselves immensely. And I think I had like late day 2 grades on them, and maybe that's where they end up going. But we're going to be talking a lot more about those guys over the next 84 days or so. Either way, you can give me your favorite player, but first I want to ask you this. Because you can't see it, but JP spends a lot of time in that corner during offense and defense. And then down there when the O-line go against the D-line. Who is the best smack talker?
Oh, best smack talk purples. That's a good. Caleb Banks really stood out today. He was going off today. I think that was one of the most impressive things about the week. But he was a relentless. Yeah. I think Max Ionator, Arizona State offensive tackle, was talking trash. Well, he was chatting it up. He almost got into a fight with Derek Moore yesterday. That's right. He almost got into it with I forgot the other. I got the edge. Another guy who sort of it's the Auburn edge. Auburn edge. He almost got into him with that.
Oh, Crawford.
Yeah, but I think he helped himself a lot.
Absolutely. Given that he hasn't played 5-year football.
Yeah, he helped himself a lot. He's incredibly athletic. But the thing that stood out for me was just as a pass protector, that's good. He could draft him really high. Trash talk wise, Keelan Rutledge as well.
That's fantastic. The guard center out at Georgia Tech.
Yeah, that's all he does.
Is he yelling like engineering terms?
He's another guy where he's gonna play through these.
Yakowitz. There are a lot of buzz about him too on the other side where the NFL's the folks are. His name's been making the rounds.
There was a moment during Georgia Tech season this right here. It's Clemson. where his nose is just was bloody and he's got blood dripping onto the jersey. He comes out for like 5 seconds, goes back in the game, and Georgia Tech wins that game. That's the type of guy that you get in that which those guys stood out like trash ball.
Thank you. And I appreciate JP sort of keeping tabs on the Vic fellas because in real time, no less. And I will get out of here on this. If you have a guy that you want to just recognize, I just gave you a silly little trash talking story there. Anyone else that you got your attention after 3 days, maybe that you didn't expect?
Oh, Rayshon Benny. You put the Tigers they used. I was pleasantly surprised when I came and watched him. I was sort of expecting a little more of a run defender, given the way that this plays. This quickness as a passer.
6'3", just a hair under 300.
Yeah, he was able to get guys all out of sorts, moving laterally. He has a nice little swim move. Where he goes up and over, which is really nice. Because he's not exactly like the biggest guy.
Yeah.
He was able to win with that quickness. I thought Rayshon Benny was really nice. Dame Tucker, keep talking about the Dame Tucker from Western Michigan.
You're going to make Jalen Coker jealous.
I know, right?
Dame Tucker like that.
The Dame Tucker, he actually sort of reminds me of the guy that came here last year, Mo Kamara.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Where they both are a little bit undersized, but I think Dame Tucker has some more quickness. I think if you get him to be like a designated pass rusher, I think that's going to be really good for him. But those two guys really stood out amongst a lot of guys that this offensive defensive line group at the Senior Bowl was one of the most impressive.
That's a great call, and that's a great way to end it, because I thought, talking about the quarterbacks just being Hamid, as kids say, but the defenses I call dominated, especially the front seven, and the opposite lines I call brought in as well. And listen, people, that's bothers me, but people sometimes under the misconception this draft class stinks. There are dudes you just gotta find it, and there are dudes that can help your team. They just may not be franchise quarterbacks, and they may not be Calvin Johnson, but there are guys that you draft first, second, third, fourth through seventh rounds that I think have an opportunity to help your team. This is, to me, been a fantastic season bowl. As I was glad to have my guy JP here with me. Rand will be back from his cruise. I don't want to call him out next week, so we'll be back together as well. But JP, appreciate you, brother. It's a lot of fun.
Of course.
Thanks to all you guys who watch and listen, and we will see you guys in the next one.